Hello everyone, welcome to another Narc Survivor live video. As you can see, I got a haircut, the old classic Narc Survivor style. In this one we're going to be talking about what narcissists typically do when they lose control of you. Because what you've got to understand is that in most cases they will do something because you are very important to them. Now sometimes you may not be that important to them, depending on the type of narcissist you are dealing with. Because of course, yes, there are these player types of narcissists who have tons of options and maybe you weren't that significant to them. I mean, in those cases, it was likely just a one-night stand or it didn't last for long. So I don't think anyone here was dealing with that. It's likely that you were in a relationship with a narcissist and you were their primary source. So that means that they were heavily dependent on you. The secondary source, the side chick, they're not important, they're not significant at all. That's just something temporary. It's just for recreational use, just for fun. You are something significant to them. You are something very special, even though they may not have appreciated you at the time. But you are their source of security and stability. They couldn't do without you. As for the side chick, the bit on the sides, the mistress, whatever we might like to call it, they're replaceable. They're expendable. They can find another one of them just around the corner. It's easy for them to get rid of them. But as for you, a grade A primary source, it's very difficult for them to replace. It's very difficult for them to find another you. And that's why they typically don't even try to, and instead they hold on to you. If a narcissist gets turned down or rejected by a secondary source, someone who's not really that close to them, they're not really going to care about that. That's not going to be a big deal to them because that person was never really intimately involved with them. And although they don't really experience intimacy, but that person wasn't close to them. They weren't a source of security and stability. So even without those bits on the side, those secondary sources, they can still continue with their lives. It wasn't that essential to them. With you, you're their life force. So they can't just do without you because they needed you to function, to survive. And that's what makes you the primary source. That's what makes you grade A. And that's how they can't just replace you. And when they lose control of you, it's very different to losing control of a secondary source. With a secondary source, they could just forget about them. They could just let them go, it doesn't matter. But with you as the primary source, when they lose control of you, they feel very insecure. Because remember, you're a source of security and stability to them. So they've lost that security now. They've lost that stability, that emotional stability. Remember, they can't regulate their own emotions. They have an arrested emotional development. They need someone to soothe them, to pacify them. And that's why you were to them. That's why you dealt with all of the blow-ups, all of the arguments, all of the trouble, the drama, the chaos. You dealt with all of that. And that's how you know that you were the primary source. Because I can tell you the secondary source doesn't have to deal with any of that. And I've been the primary source, I've been the secondary source as well. So I know what it's like to be on both sides. And actually, I've probably been the secondary source more often than I've been the primary. And I can tell you it's much easier. You don't have to deal with any of the drama, any of the problems. You get to see the best side of the narcissist, even though, of course, it's fake. So even then, I mean, it's really just, it's a fantasy, it's a delusion. But you do get to see a better side of them when you're the secondary. And I've spoken about that in past videos as well, the difference between the two. But yeah, they picked you out as the primary source because you're better than a secondary source. You're more valuable. I mean, you can provide the energy, the vitality, the life force, the strength, the security, the stability. You can provide all of these things consistently that a secondary source simply cannot provide. Secondary source is just good for a one-night stand or just a short amount of time. You are good for long term. Now that's why, of course, when they lose control of you, they become very insecure. They feel like they're in a fight for their lives. It's like life or death to them in that moment. And of course, since it's like the oxygen has been taken away from them, they're not just going to let you go without a fight. They're going to hold on to you. And in some rare cases, this is rare, and many of you may not have dealt with this, but even when you've woken up to what you're dealing with and they put you through hell, you got rid of them, they lost control of you, even after all of that, they may still come back to love bomb you. But only if they think they've still got a chance. If they think that they could still be in your good graces again. If they still think that you might still value them, that you may see something good in them, then of course they'll give it a go. I mean, if they think that it will work with you, but even then you have to do most of the work, because love bombing for a narcissist, that takes them more energy and effort than for them to devalue you. It's much easier for them to devalue you because that's pretty much their natural state. That's what they're normally like. And for them to put on an act, for them to give you all of the glitz and glamour, that takes a lot of work for a narcissist. So if they're going to come back and do that, they're going to be expected a payout. They're going to be expecting you to go along with it, to work with them, and pretty much you have to do most of the work in that case. And that's why most of the time, they're not going to come back to love bomb you. Especially if they know you're not susceptible to their manipulation anymore. And instead what they will do is they will just go straight into the devaluation again. They'll start putting you down, targeting your self-esteem, making you feel like you're not good enough for them. But you have to do something, you have to repay them. You have to help them in some way, and they will play the victim. They may even smear your name, get lots of people involved, and just make it very difficult for you to leave. They will coerce you, they will intimidate you. They will force you to be involved in a situation that you do not want to be involved in. Because they recognize that their pet is slipping away, and they just don't want that to happen. Because remember, they need you. They can't live without you. It's like you're taking their oxygen away from them. You're taking away their favorite toy that they like to play with. And we're talking about survival here. This is like life or death to them. They cannot survive. They cannot function without a source of supply. They need something to offload onto. They've got to have an emotional punching bag, an emotional tampon. They've got to have that. Because otherwise what happens is all of that toxicity, all of that rottenness inside of them that normally comes out onto you, that stays inside of them. And it just eats them alive. Their own shame takes over them and it destroys them gradually. And of course, no narcissist wants to go through that. They don't mind offloading that onto you. But they do not want to have to confront their own disease. Because it's very toxic, even for them. You think the narcissist is toxic? Their shame is just so, it's so rotten, so destructive, that even they don't want to deal with it. It's too toxic even for them. And that's why they just tend to leave it alone. They deny it, they suppress it, they deflect it onto someone, because even they can't deal with that. And that's why when they deflect it onto you, it's so potent, but not in a good way, where it just destroys you. It makes you feel miserable. And sometimes they will use that to contain you, to put you back into the box, to get you under their control again. They will use their toxicity, put you in a state of fear, guilt or shame, to put you back under their control again. And essentially, you know what this is like when they're doing this? It's kind of like they've it's like they farted in a closet, and then they just put you in there and lock the door, and they just see how long it takes you until you just give up, until you can no longer stand their stench. That's pretty much what it's like. They just give it the full force of their toxicity, and then they just sit back and see how long it takes you to give in. And of course, most of you, it may not take you long, because it's very difficult for us to deal with that. I mean, we're relatively healthy people. We're not like them. So of course, that's going to have an effect on us. And then we may just cave in. But this is why we do have these techniques that can help us here, such as the grey rock, observe, don't absorb, and also limited contact, no contact. That can help us here, because essentially what they're doing is, it's like they're injecting you with poison, as Ross Rosenberg has mentioned in one of his videos. They're injecting you with this poison and you become sick. So by practicing the grey rock technique, where you observe and you don't absorb, it's kind of like you're covered in Teflon. like you have a protective layer on the surface, and this protects you from the poison that they are trying to inject into you. And when that happens, the narcissist will become frustrated, because then they can't inject you with their poison. They can't offload their toxicity onto you. So of course that's going to frustrate them. And unfortunately, they will typically ramp it up, because they've already seen that you have the capacity to hold their garbage. They've seen that you have the ability to do that. So even though you may start practicing the grey rock, you may observe and not absorb, they're still going to test you. They're going to ramp it up to see if they can get a reaction out of you again. To see if you can be their puppet, that emotional punching bag like you were before. And they're going to keep trying and trying. They're going to do anything they can to get a reaction out of you. And what you have to do when they do that is you must not give in. Do not react. And if it gets worse, if they keep crossing your boundaries, then you have to walk away. You just leave the situation. Because then by doing that, you're training them. You're teaching them that if they act this way around you, then you're just not going to be there. You're not going to tolerate it. Now, of course, this is different if you're dealing with malignant narcissists. If you're dealing with those who are on the higher end of the spectrum, sociopaths, psychopaths, they're very dangerous. And of course, if you practice the grey rock around them and they ramp it up, it gets worse. They may become physically violent. They may do some horrific, extreme things to you. They may even try to take your life. So you do not want to be doing that around them. If you're dealing with someone who has been violent in the past, or they've done something extreme, not just verbal abuse, then I do not recommend this, because it could leave you in a very dangerous situation. If you're dealing with a high spectrum narcissist, a sociopath or a psychopath, someone who is malignant. And that's why, if you are dealing with that type of person, you do need to seek professional support. You must speak to a life coach or a therapist, and you can book a one-on-one with me by going on to my website, narcsurvivor.co.uk, where I will be available to speak to you one-on-one, and we can talk about this. We can see what is the safest option for you, because I've got plenty of experience dealing with low spectrum narcissists and also those who are high on the spectrum as well. So I've got plenty of experience in this, and I've done tons of research, so you're in safe hands with me. But also, if you prefer to speak to someone else, someone who you feel more comfortable with, that's fine as well. But just make sure that you speak to someone. If you're dealing with a high spectrum narcissist, don't just use the grey rock. That may cause it to ramp up, and they could become physically violent. And this can even happen even if you do call the police. Even if you do take them to court or get a restraining order. And I wish that I could say that we can trust in the authorities and that they're going to protect you. It's not as simple as that. I've seen many cases online where the police were called many times and restraining orders were imposed. People were taken to court and the narcissist even went to jail. But then later on they came back, they became violent, they murdered the victim. I've seen all of these things before. Not in person, but I've studied this online, I've seen the cases. So be very careful. If you were dealing with a high spectrum narcissist, you never know what they might do. They will try to destroy you because you're their life force. They need you like air. They will feel like you're taking oxygen away from them, like they can't breathe. And then they're just going to do whatever they can to try and breathe again. So this is why I advise that you speak to someone who does have a lot of experience in this. Personal experience. And that's why I recommend that you book a session with myself, because I've dealt with these people firsthand. I know what they're like. I know how to deal with them. And of course, there's also other coaches and therapists online who do specialize in narcissistic abuse. But what I do not advise is speaking to therapists or even psychologists who do not specialize in narcissistic abuse, because that could lead to a lot of problems. They must understand this disorder. Keep in mind, this is my advice as a relationship expert and a life coach. I'm not a licensed therapist. I'm not a psychologist. So, the disclaimer, I have to say that this is my personal opinion. Just in case anything happens in your individual situation. But based on my research, my experience, I advise that you do speak to someone who specializes in narcissistic abuse, and that is very important. But otherwise, if you're not dealing with a high spectrum narcissist, you're not dealing with one that's malignant, or they haven't been violent before, and you feel like it's safe for you to use the grey rock, then by all means, use it. Observe, don't absorb. And it's likely that eventually they will give up. They will realize that they can't get supply from you anymore. And then they'll just go off and find an easier target, because they can't get it from you anymore. You're not going to give them your energy, your emotions, your reactions. Or they may just see it as though it's just too much work. Remember, they want it easy, they're very lazy. So they'll just go get it somewhere else. But not all narcissists are going to be that simple. Because some of them, yes, they will involve other people, that will target you financially. And they will smear your name. They will just do anything to try and regain control of you again. So that's why I advise that if you are dealing with a high spectrum narcissist, I advise that you do speak to a therapist or coach first who specializes in narcissistic abuse, because otherwise they could destroy your business, they could get you fired from your job, you could lose your house, your home, your children, they could become physically violent. This is why it's very important to speak to someone first, so that you do stay safe, because that's the number one priority and concern for me. People's safety above everything else. And that's why I always make new videos, I always update this information. Because of course some of the things that I've said a few years ago do not ring true today. And I used to talk about how you just gotta go no contact, live your best life, it's the best revenge. But if you're dealing with a high spectrum narcissist, that could put you in a very dangerous situation. Because seeing your happiness, seeing your health, seeing you moving on, it will make them want to destroy you. It really will. And that's why you've got to be very careful. A lot of people in this world do not have your best interests in mind. They don't want to see you healthy and happy. Now for me, when I see someone who's healthy and happy and living their best life, as long as it appears real and genuine, there's nothing that brings me more joy. Even if I'm just witnessing it, even if I'm not even a part of it. Just to witness it, just to observe it, that makes me happy. Because that's what I want to see. But unfortunately, there's a lot of people out there in this world who are not like that. If they see your happiness, if they see your joy, and they can't partake, they can't participate in it, then they will seek to destroy it. They will try to cause problems for you. Unfortunately, that's just the way it is. That's just what some people are like. And we do have to be aware of it. There's a lot of envious, jealous people out there who feel entitled to you in your life. And you just got to recognize that you do not owe them anything. You are not responsible for them. We are all responsible for ourselves. You're not responsible for another adult. So we gotta be very careful. Because many of these narcissists, you never know how they might react. And even the low spectrum narcissists, sometimes if they feel pressured, if they feel like they're pushed to it, they may do something that you've never seen before. I mean, anyone, when they feel like they're under stress, when they feel like they're under pressure, when they feel like they're losing something, they're probably not going to respond well to it. And of course, when we're talking about narcissists, you're their source of supply, you're their source of stability and security, you're their oxygen. So of course, when they're losing that, they're not going to respond well. Because you have a lot of value you're very advantageous to them, so they're not just going to let you go so easily. They're going to hold on to you for their lives. And, you know, I've seen cases online. There's been people who never had a criminal record. From what we know, never did anything wrong to anyone. And because they were just very jealous, very possessive and controlling, then all of a sudden they murdered someone. They took their life in the most horrific way. I remember I saw one Indian guy in this one case. I think this was on the Ghana Solves YouTube channel. It's a really great channel. The guy saw this one video on there, and this guy was clearly very toxic to her, and she just didn't want to put up with it anymore. So she broke up with him. And then all of a sudden, he went to a store, bought some rope, shovels, everything. He put her in the boot of the car, tied her up. He drove about 5 hours away. And then he buried her alive. He buried her under the ground. And that was after he violently attacked her. I think he even slit her throat as well. But she was still alive under the ground. Died a very slow death. And there was another case where another woman, she had a fear of fire. Because at some point in her childhood, something happened with fire. And ever since then, she was terrified of it. And I can't remember the exact details, but from what I remember, this guy then, because he knew she was terrified of fire, he then burned her alive. So be aware of this. Be aware of what people are like. Whatever they feel is most important to you, they will sabotage it, they will destroy it, they will take it away from you. And whatever they think is your deepest, darkest fear, they will harass you with it. Because that's their supply. That's how they feel something when normally they're dead inside. They're completely rotten inside. But you're full of life. You're full of good energy. And that's why they picked you. The narcissist isn't going to pick someone who has no life inside of them. They want someone who's full of energy, full of life, who can give them supply. And when they got you, they don't want to let you go. They hold on to you against your will, because they don't care about you. They don't care about your individuality, your identity. They don't care about what you want. It's all just about them. It's how they can use you like an object to make themselves feel better. And honestly, that's something I could never understand. Because although people in my childhood, people in my family, they didn't have any boundaries for me. And as I've spoken about before, they were always going through my stuff, deliberately walking in on me in the shower just to shame me, because I was just a kid back then. I was even sexually abused on several occasions. They didn't have any boundaries for me. But I had some boundaries for myself. Because when I was being harassed, when I was being abused, I ran away. I would jump out of the window. I'd be gone all night, even as a child. Because I always had boundaries for myself. I always valued separation, my own identity, my own individuality. But everyone else around me, it seemed that they didn't. And that's the thing. Because if you value and respect yourself, your own self, your own identity, then you're going to do the same for everyone else. You're not going to cross over boundaries. But that's exactly what they do. Because there's no identity, no sense of self. And a person with no identity, no sense of self, that means no principles, no values, no morals. It makes them very dangerous. Because they're not holding on to anything that matters, that means anything to them. And that's the problem. Thanks for the donation, Kenzo. That's the problem. No morals, no values, no principles. They will do anything. There's nothing inside of them that tells them to stop. And gradually it escalates over time as it becomes normal to them. And sometimes, if you're in it long enough, it can become normal to you. The way that they're treating you can seem normal. You just accept it, you tolerate it. It's like the boiling frog syndrome. They gradually turn up the heat. And then at some point, you wonder how this happened. It's because they have no boundaries, no sense of self, no identity, no respect for themselves, so they've got no respect for anyone else. It's really sad, but this is just the way that it is. And this is why boundaries are so important. Always set boundaries for yourself. Always respect other people's boundaries as well. And make sure that you enforce boundaries for your children. Many families in the world, they are incestuous. Maybe not always physically, but emotionally. Look up emotional incest. This happens a lot between a narcissistic parent and their child, where they dump all of their emotions onto the child. The child becomes their caretaker, their therapist. And no child should have to take on that role for their adult parent. That's just not right. But this is what these narcissists do to us. This is what your narcissistic parent may have done to you. Because that's what was done to me in my childhood. I constantly had to deal with my parents' stress, their worries, their problems, what they were going through. It was never about me, it was never about my emotional needs. Fortunately, there were neighbours who lived next door, as I've spoken about before. A church minister and his wife, who took really good care of me. They actually cared about me. They cared about what I was feeling, what I was going through. And I could talk to them about what was happening. And they knew that I was being abused. And that's why the church minister's wife, she said to me, I'm like her stepchild and she's my stepmother. And thankfully, because of that, I grew, I matured, my emotional needs were met, and who knows if they weren't. I wouldn't have developed this awareness maybe, or maybe I would have become a narcissist myself for being in that type of environment. Because initially I was the golden child, I was the favorite of both of my parents. But then once I became a teenager, I soon became the scapegoat. And many of you may have experienced that. But you were the golden child initially in childhood. And then as soon as you started going through puberty, then you become scapegoated. Now that's typically what happens. And I've spoken about that in my earlier videos. Once you become a teenager, it's like it's all over after that. Once you start to find your own identity, your own likes and interests, you start having your own friends, maybe dating, then it becomes a real problem for the narcissistic parent. Because before that, you were always available to them. They had control over you. They could tell you what to think, what to do. You were their supply. And what happens then, when the narcissistic parent loses control of their child, it's very sad, because it's like you've had your childhood robbed from you. It affects your identity. When you're just growing and you're learning more about yourself, it can cause you to become isolated. You can't make any friends. And maybe you're really shy. You don't have much confidence in yourself. So you can't even talk to people of the opposite sex. And you don't engage in any hobbies or interests. Your life is just spent at home. It just revolves around the narcissist. It's really sad. But this is what the narcissistic parent does when they lose control of their child. They especially start losing control when you start going through puberty. That's when they start becoming very insecure. And they become very controlling of you. And when a child is young, of course, the parent needs to have quite a lot of control over their child. I mean, they need to be in control of pretty much everything. Once the child starts going through puberty, then the child needs more freedom. Then the parent needs to step back to allow their child to grow and to develop their personality. But narcissistic parents don't do that. They do the opposite. They get very insecure. They feel the child slipping away, and then they become very controlling. And that is abuse. It just robs their childhood away from them. So that's it. That's what happens when the narcissist loses control of you. When the narcissistic parent loses control of their child, as many of you may have experienced as well. I know I did. But yeah, let me know what you think about what I've said so far. Let me know if you can relate. Let me know if you have any questions. Alex Major says they break your self-esteem down. Yeah, that's it. They break your self-esteem down and then they blame you and shame you for it. And especially for the results of what happens after they've broken your self-esteem down, after they've destroyed your confidence. Because of course, when that's done to you, you might develop these unhealthy coping strategies or addictions, and then they just go and blame you for that as well. And you're just trying to cope. You're just trying to hold on to yourself. There's just no winning with them. And if you try to leave, then you're abandoning them. Jared Grant says she's trashed my name all over town and everywhere she goes to. Yeah, they will, to save their own reputation, their own false image. They've got to have someone to blame, someone to scapegoat. Jared Grant says, I can't even walk into daycare without getting dirty looks from all the parents. She's told them all nothing but lies about me. It's so embarrassing. Yeah, that's all just to support the false self. It's to make them look good, make them feel better about themselves. That's how they just run away from it all, from everything that they've done to you. They justify all of the things that they do. But if you were to do that to them, Ted Predick says, I started drinking and smoking after the abuse. Yeah, that can happen. And I've been through that as well. After being abused, I turned to cannabis. That helped me cope at the time. And this will happen. You will develop these addictions, these unhealthy coping strategies. And It's understandable. It might get you through it initially. But you don't want to let that develop into long-term addictions. Especially once you're away from them. Start setting these healthier routines for yourself. Eating healthier foods. Exercising. Getting plenty of sleep each night. Mindfulness, meditation, journaling. All of these things will help you. And you may not like it initially, eating healthy foods, going to the gym, but in time you will get into a routine and you will look forward to it because it will make you feel a lot better. And especially when you're eating healthy foods and you're exercising, you will feel good shortly afterwards. It really helps with your mental and emotional health. So definitely I'm all for a healthy lifestyle. Sherry Allison asks, can you fix the damage that is caused by a narcissist? Yes, you can. Whatever's been done to you, you can fix it. You can unlearn anything that you have learned. It will take time for you to heal, and talk therapy is very helpful. Speak to a therapist or coach that you can trust, and also speak to someone who specializes in PTSD. Now that's very important because that is the trauma recovery. Now I'm not a trauma recovery coach myself, but there is a service that I used and that I trust, which is BetterHelp. I've been partnered with them for several years, and you can book a session with them by going to betterhelp.com/Narc Survivor. And by using that link, you will be helping to support our community here as well. Helena says the hair is on point. Glad to hear it, thank you. I thought I'd return back to the classic Narc Survivor style. I know initially I did have quite long hair in my first videos, but then I did cut it short. And from what I recall, I think the first time I had short hair like this in a live video, that was when I was in York in England. I remember doing a live video at the castle there, and I rented a house for a couple of weeks. I was doing a video in the jacuzzi. Those were good times. I really missed that, traveling around the UK, doing these live videos. Candy Sugar says the look of disgust is so hard to take. Yeah, it can be, because what you're going to understand with a lot of narcissists is that they actually believe it. They're gaslighting themselves. They really believe that there's something wrong with you, that everything you did, it wasn't enough, you've got to do more. got to help them. And you treated them badly because they're very arrogant and entitled. They believe that they're perfect. Their false self is faultless and flawless. And they devalue you. They have a black and white mentality. So, to them, you're just a very horrible person. You're the villain. And that's why you see that look of disgust. Because many of them, they actually believe it. They have to believe it to support the false self so that their disorder can function. Lorraine Diane says, unfortunately, we can't erase the past, but we have to understand what it was and make the best of our future. Yes, that's very important. We've got to make the best of our future. And just not let it affect us. We've got to go through it, process the emotions, heal and move on from it. Don't let it define the rest of your life. All right. Got a lot of clouds here because we're quite high up. I'm going to be leaving this place in a couple of days. But Nala has had a great time here. She loves it, just sitting on the balcony. She's out in nature. And that's another thing that I always recommend, is that you spend time in nature. Well, that is very important. That is one of the most important things you can do for yourself on your healing journey. And you may not think that is such a big deal, but just give it a go. Go and spend the day out in a forest hiking, climb a mountain if it's safe for you to do so. Go for a walk by a lake. Spend time with the birds, with the chipmunks, and just recognize how you feel. Because remember, nature is our natural environment. Now, most of us, we live in a box, we drive in a box, we work in a box, and then we die in a box. And that's really not healthy at all. We've got to get out of the box, we've got to spend time in nature, because that really can heal us. And that's why you may notice throughout all of the years that I've been doing this in my live videos, you always see that I'm out in nature. I'm always traveling around, climbing mountains, hiking, walking around the lakes, the waterfalls, because this is what heals me more than anything else. This is what makes me feel good. Because it's our natural environment. So yeah, I decided to finish with that. Spend time in nature, exercise, drink plenty of water, eat healthy foods, fruit and vegetables, nuts and seeds. Get plenty of sleep, some good rest. Keep educating yourself. Keep watching these videos. Journal. And speak to a therapist or coach. Also speak to someone who specializes in CPTSD. You do all of those things and you will notice a difference in time. Things will begin to get a lot better for you. You will feel a lot healthier and happier. It's just a matter of time. Just keep your head up, keep it going. Don't give up, stay strong. We are all together in this. Together, we will get better and stronger. We will survive narcissistic abuse. Give the video a thumbs up if you found it helpful. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section. Hit subscribe and click all notifications to be notified when I upload a new video or go live in the future. Donations are greatly appreciated, no matter how small. You can donate to my PayPal. It is paypal.me/Narc Survivor. You can book a one-on-one coaching session with me on my website. It's narcsurvivor.co.uk. And you can follow me on Instagram. It is Narc Survivor YouTube. Thank you all for joining me on another Narc Survivor live video. And I will talk to you soon.